I just bought
Nice.
it.
I was going to say I just bought it too.
I'm sure the people who were watching the show saw that Rich and I were like looking down at our
Mhm.
at our desks, and we're like,
Yep.
okay, continue to pay out. Hey everybody, welcome back to the NerdNest podcast, and we have the full crew. We got Carrie, we got I almost said Carrie and Fox. We got Carrie, we got Russ, we got Rich, and I somehow managed to mix up two of the same guy. So, it's one of those episodes. But I want to start today off with what we've been playing. And I'm going to start with Russ. Russ, what have you been playing, man?
Well, it's been a while since I've been on the podcast. It's great to see you guys. And so I played a lot while I was gone, like actually more than normally. And so I brought my ROG Ally X with me on travel to Europe. And, there's long flights there. And so I ended up beating both Control and Resident Evil 7 Remake. And I really enjoyed the experience on both of them. Control in particular, I have been on this podcast whining about how like it's too punishing when you die and stuff because you lose like 10% of your like eco or whatever the heck they call it, like your XP stuff every time you die. And I was like, this is a losing battle because every 10% I'm dying at this boss is just going to kill me, And so turns out there's accessibility options in the game. You can just turn on all the way like full invincibility if you want. Like you can just tweak it perfectly. And so that's what I did. I tweaked it and I ended up really enjoying the game without that fear of like losing that 10% all the time. Really enjoyed it. And then Final Fantasy VII, I actually had a question for you guys because I finished it. I liked it. Am I supposed to play Crisis Core next? That's a prequel, right? But like how am I supposed to be playing this?
Well, okay, I can't tell you how you're supposed to play it because I never played the original Crisis Core because that was only on
PSP.
That PSP, right? So I never played the original one, but after I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake, that was the next game that I played was Crisis Core, and I will say you should, in my opinion, play Crisis Core before you play Rebirth because you get a lot of backstory with Zack, and at the beginning or at the end, spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake, not Rebirth, but at the end, like in the credits, Zack shows up for a second, and they don't explain it. Like he just kind of shows up in the credits, and you're like, "What the hell is happening here?" And I'm confused. And like, honestly, I finished Final Fantasy Rebirth, Crisis Core, and Final Fantasy Remake. I still don't know what the hell's happening. So I don't know.
There's Kingdom Hearts of you.
Yeah, it's very confusing. But I think Crisis Core is fantastic. If you haven't played it, it's really, really good.
And that's
Rich,
what I was
did you play it?
because it's.
Did I play? No, I haven't. I played Remake, haven't finished it. I haven't played either Crisis Core or Rebirth, but I am.
Gotcha. What were you saying, Russ?
I was going to say, I feel like I don't want to go and jump into Rebirth, just because I don't want to play it on my PlayStation. I want to wait for PC. And so this might be a good stopgap, considering the fact it took me 2 years to play Remake. Like, it'll take me a good year to play Crisis Core, and so it'll be perfect. But then also it's on sale right now, so I was wondering, because it's only like $20 or something like that on Green Man Gaming. So, yeah.
Yeah. The thing I like most about Crisis Core is the combat, because it's just one character. You don't have other characters to deal with. It's just you're just one guy, and the combat's very like you kind of build up like you have builders and spenders, and then like a thing pops up that says, hey, somebody wants to help you or whatever, and it's like a lotto system. Like there's slot machine going the whole time. And if your slot machine lines up, then, you get somebody that pops in and helps you out real quick, and then they take off. And that really surprised me because it's very different than any other Final Fantasy game that I played. But I really enjoyed it. And I think I put 50 hours or so into that game. It was really good.
Wow. That's more than I put into Remake. So I played those two and finished those on the plane, so that was great. But then I've been playing Astrobot ever since I got home, basically, and so I'm like almost done with the third nebula. The nebulas are like the worlds or whatever, and I've been going through and trying to 100% it, which is something I rarely do. But that's the one thing I wanted to mention about the game is that actually is like probably the closest to like a perfect game when it comes to walking you through the 100%ing. Because when you finish a level and you're like, you missed a bot or you missed a puzzle piece, whatever, when you jump back into that level, you've got like this little bird you can buy for 200 coins, which is kind of a trivial amount. And that bird will follow you around, and then when you get close to one of those things that you missed, it'll start like doing a radar thing, and it's like perfect. So I've been able to like go back and do that.
I used that one time, and I was like, "That's what that does." I got so mad that I used it. I was like, "No, I don't. Really? I do not want that."
I love that. That's like a perfect mix for me. Like me, like when you're in like Super Mario Odyssey, for example, and you're just in the world, and you're like, I know there are other moons around, and I can't find them. That's like to me a big turnoff. Like I'm like, I don't want to play this game anymore. You know.
Yeah.
But when I have something like the choice, and you don't have to use that bird every time, you can just pay that $200 once, and then like the next time you jump in that level, you can just choose not to use it or not. It'll be free after you pay that $200, and so it's like it's just a perfect match for me. Like my son was watching me play it, and he was like, I would never use that bird, and I'm like, I'm gonna always use that bird. You know, I'm gonna try to not use it the first time through, and then afterwards, I'm gonna use that bird.
Yeah, that's the way that I was playing it too, Russ, and I agree with you. Having that as an option is absolutely amazing. What were you going to say, Rich?
Yeah, I do. By the way, I do agree that having it as an option is great. It's fantastic. I just mean, I'm like your son. I'm like, I'm not going to use it.
Right.
Yeah, I want my experience, right? Like what I find fun is that act of like just doing the scavenger hunt, right? The other thing, like to your point of just like this like quality of life around finding things, and how perfect it is that like they have like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever the number is, they have those bots like at the top of the menu. And so if you get the first one and you get the third one, but you missed the second one, you can clearly tell. And so it makes it easy, and you can say, okay, it's somewhere between the first one I got and the next one I got. I just have to look between these two.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another great point. Is that I have used that before as well. I try my first run to get all of them, but there are some times where I'm just like, I got to just finish this level. I gotta go at this point.
Yeah.
And then there's also those like skill based levels, like the ones that are based on like the symbols of your controller and stuff.
Yeah.
And those are rough, but I've been getting through each of them. It takes a while. Like I posted one on Twitter. I was like, hey, this game is so fun or whatever. And someone commented like, how many times did you have to record this in order to get this segment? And I was like, oh, like 50, you know. The thing is that those 50 times were still fun. And that's the thing that's really a big separator for me, is there's enough time between like your save spots or, your like quick spawn or whatever. There's just enough distance where it's not frustrating. It's like Celeste in that regard, where you can just kind of keep going in that loop till you get it right. And so, really been enjoying it. I know I'm bogarting all our time, but those are the games I've been playing and really love Astrobot.
I mean, Astrobot, it's definitely a game of the year contender for me. I've just been having so much fun with it. And one thing that I wish is that when you finish a level, that it would say, this is how many coins you got on this level. This is how many times you died on this level. Like, give me some stats so that because I think yesterday I sat down and I think it was either X or square was like the levels that I was on based on the shapes. And there was one that was like, you have to play to the beat of the music, and like the whole world's kind of jumping around and dancing to the beat of the music, and you're just trying to time everything perfectly. And I probably did that, I don't know, it had to be like 70, 80 times, because like I would get all the way to the end and then I would screw up, and then I would die on the first jump over and over and over. And I just, eventually I got it, and I was like, yes, that was awesome. But I'm curious how many times I actually died on that.
Yeah. The one funny thing was happening last night. I was playing, and it's like it's one of those mini worlds where basically it's just like these 3 bells that are conking, and then they like make a wave that you have to jump over. But then at the same time, you have to use your like Super Mario Sunshine water or whatever to go and like kill all of the material around them so that they drop, basically. And it took me forever, probably a good 70 times. Many times when I was playing it, I would hit select an R1 after I died, because that's the load save state hotkey that I use when playing emulation. It's just like, and I'm like trying to go back to my save state, and there are no save states in that game. But it was just hilarious. Like I was in that mode, where I was just trying to get back into it. And so I got it eventually. But yeah, it took me probably close to 45 minutes for that one like 30-second level, and I just enjoyed the whole time. Like I usually get really frustrated with that kind of stuff, but not with this game for some reason.
How many bots do you have?
25 or so right now. So I'm like almost halfway through the game, I think.
And what about you, Rich? How many bots do you have?
It's so I haven't played all week, but I want to say it's like 180. So I left off at the last level of Nebula 3. I think I finished that level, but I didn't go back and 100% the Nebula. So like I had like those button levels that I didn't get to finish. But that last level in the Nebula, I'm not going to say which one, but it's another, branded Sony level. And it is wonderful. It's amazing. I love it.
I just unlocked it. I haven't tried that one yet.
Okay, good.
The thing why my bots are so low, I think, even though I'm at that same spot, is I'm not doing the Lost Galaxy levels, like the ones that you can unlock and you get the swirly thing and you get the next level. I haven't done any of those yet. I was going to wait and just do those all at once at one point, and so I just haven't done those yet. So I think that's part of it.
I may also be overestimating because like I haven't had a chance to play all week, but it's a blast.
I hit 220 this morning while I was playing, so I think I've gotten all of the like when you're, because in the game you're rebuilding your PS5 or whatever, and I think I got all the parts now, but I'm playing very different than you guys. I'm just running through, and the only time that I try and go back and find stuff afterwards is when I get to a boss world that's still like I don't have enough robots to unlock it, and so I'm like, okay, I guess I got to go back and find some, and that's when I go and I get the bird and I go looking for it. But man, I never 100% games. I think that this one might be possible that I will just keep playing even after I beat the final boss because it's so fun.
Me too.
Carrie, what have you been playing, man?
So I finished up Starfield. I actually 100%ed Starfield. And to call back to what you said, Russ, the accessibility they changed in Starfield, and I have to revisit Fallout 4 because I don't even think I looked at it. But one thing that bothered me to my core, starting from like Bethesda, Oblivion, and Skyrim stuff, was they're RPGs by design, and RPGs, you are supposed to, you can face off against something that is way outside your level and get stomped on, right? You need to level up to make that encounter easier. And with Oblivion and Skyrim, what they had was a difficulty slider. In real time, at any given time, you can just be like, this is too hard, I'm going to make it easy. And there's no repercussions at all. And it's like, this is an RPG. I should not be just going after this giant at level 1. This rat at level 80 shouldn't be scaling at level with me to level 80. Like, guys, figure something out a little. Like, there's got to be some ceiling for a dungeon rat, right? A dungeon rat shouldn't be getting up to like level 80 unless he's like some epic legendary rat or something, right? Like King Rat. This shouldn't just be some regular old rat. But what they changed in Starfield, when you adjust the difficulty, when you make it harder, they actually increase the amount of experience points you get. So as you just like, and they separate like everything. So you can say, oh, in environments, do you want environments to impact you heavily? Like if there's radiation and stuff, do you want that to be like almost like realistic, like serious? Or do you want to tone that down a little? And then they do it in another way where like, how can you recover from that? So you can kind of bifurcate these types of things. And I had to tone down the radiation and oxygen stuff because that can get really gnarly. And I had no indication from like all my time playing of like what I was supposed to be doing correctly. And then there's also like, dehydration and eating, making sure you eat and stuff. So it's more like survival-ish. And I wound up like finding like enough difficulty just boosting everything. So I got like 40% or 46% extra XP all the time. And I was like, this is awesome. Like I want to make the game more difficult and I'm being rewarded. I think a thing that you might not like, Russ, is that if you make it easier, it actually scales the XP you get downward. So you get less XP if you make it too easy on yourself. But I think that makes sense because if you just make it too easy for yourself and you can just like spam and cheese your way to like level up and stuff, I don't know. I appreciate what they did in Starfield, and there's lots of little things that they did. But anyway, I 100% did that. And I'm kind of waiting for Shattered Space. So I don't know what's going to go with that, but I kind of like peeled away from it for a bit until that comes out. And I was going to buy Ragnarok the Friday night after my on-call. And I was like, oh, sweet. So I went on Fanatical. I put in my coupon code, and they're like, nope, no more. They don't have, shop's closed, no more keys. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you sold out? And they don't have any launch discount on Steam for Ragnarok, which is like everyone does that. Even like I was like, oh, it was 10% off on Steam, and I look at its full price. I'm like, what? So I was like, I'll just wait for Fanatical to come back. And then I was like, you know what? I got Space Marines 2 for free because I bought the AMD 7900 GRE, which is a fantastic GPU. And I started playing Space Marines 2, and man, oh man, is that game. I hope people don't sleep on it because there's like so much stuff coming out right now that it can get lost in the weeds of what's available. And Space Marines 2 is so much better than Space Marines 1. Space Marines 1 is a very PS360 type of game where it's kind of almost paint by numbers. You're going through it, but it was very decidedly action game, third person action game in that generation. And now they've incorporated a lot of Souls light type of things. So like parrying correctly, like Sekiro, basically, like there's indications that you need to parry. There's indications when there is an attack that's coming into you that it cannot be parried or even blocked. So you need to dodge. So there's lots of like indicators that you have to like, you're just playing the game, right? Of the Souls light stuff. But man, oh man, does it look amazing. And the first chapter in, they like, let's just show everyone what's up. There's like a scene where you just like beginning scene, right? Like first 20 minutes, you get grenades, and then this swarm of like alien things start coming after you. And I kid you not, there's like 300 of them on the screen, all swarming after you. And I'm just chucking grenades. I'm like, oh no. And then they start building like a ladder for themselves. So they just keep on piling up so that they can kind of all just scamper like World War Z type of stuff. And then they're coming around, and I'm like, oh my God. So it's like, I'm just fighting off everything. I'm running around. It was so good. And then you go into this like pit fight with a bunch of stuff, and it just removes the health bar. It's just like an action sequence that's going to happen. So it's just, you will die eventually. But he takes off his helmet. It's the same Space Marine Titus from Space Marines 1. And I played through Space Marines 1, but I've never been a big Warhammer fan. I've always like kind of appreciated the lore and whatever. But when I saw him, I was like, oh, sick. It's the same guy I played as like, 47 years ago or something. So it's really cool. And then basically that's the whole tutorial section, right? The first chapter is the tutorial, and it moved along at a nice pace. Didn't really hem and haw, like stop everything, press A to do this. It does it, but it's like, just go, right? And then the game starts, and it's like, you can play co-op now. And I'm like, what? And it's like, there's co-op in this game? And so there's like a real big blend of Gears of War, the co-op section, but with Souls light mechanisms, and I don't have anyone to play with. And I'm like, oh man. But yeah, Space Marines 2 looks amazing, and it's playing real good. So I'm glad a little bit that I could not buy Ragnarok, because I probably would have skipped on this a bit had I not.
That card that it came with the card that you bought. I'm unfamiliar with AMD graphics cards. So like, what's the equivalent?
It's a 4070 Ti. So like a $700, $800 card from NVIDIA. This is $550. And I mean, value-wise, it's really good. You don't get the DLSS stuff. And we talked about this in the Discord, like FSR 3.1 is very performant. There was an update to Ragnarok. There's another patch where they fixed DLSS. So that is now outperforming FSR 3.1. But there has been situations, and I have to find it, but FSR 3.1 isn't a slouch, and it's as a frame generation technique, FSR 3 requires FSR. FSR 3.1 decouples the upscaling part with the frame generation part. So you can do frame gen FSR 3, but you can do like Intel XeSS as your upscaler. And so like all the new Sony games do it. So like Ratchet and Clank on my Ally X, I was doing frame generation with FSR 3, but XeSS quality mode. And so I'm actually upscaling to 1080p and getting like 80 FPS average, 70, 80 FPS average on my Ally X playing Ratchet and Clank. I played that when I went to Disney World, and like whenever there was like downtime, I was just playing that, and I was super happy with it. So I'm a big fan of FSR 3.1. The AMD card is nice. I still haven't installed Bazite on it or anything to like, do the SteamOS of it. But yeah, it's really it's an impressive card for the money. And so far, and especially I got 2 free games and Space Marines 2 on it, so it's already value for me as it is.
We'll get to the other games that you've been playing and Rich has been playing and I've been playing in a minute. But, you bring up AMD's FSR. And one of the things that's in the show notes is that AMD, up until now, AMD has been completely platform agnostic, meaning that it doesn't matter what hardware you have. If you want to use FSR, you can use FSR. And then there's this article over at PCGamers.com where they talked about an interview with Tom's Hardware with AMD Senior Vice President Jack. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name because I'll screw it up. And then here's what they said. On the handheld side, my number one priority is battery life. If you look at the ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, it's just that battery life is not there. I need multiple hours. I need to be able to play Wukong for 3 hours, not 60 minutes. This is where frame generation and interpolation come in. So this is the FSR 4 that we're adding. We completely pivoted the team 9 to 12 months ago to be AI based. So now we're going to be AI based frame generation, frame interpolation. And the idea is to do that in order to increase efficiency and maximize battery life so you can basically lock in your frames. When you're doing frame, maybe I'm wrong about this, but when you're doing frame generation, usually that comes with latency, right? And you said that you were using frame generation with FSR 3.1 on Space Marine 2. Were you feeling latency?
So Space Marine 2 does not. I'm just saying, I got on a tangent. Space Marine 2 only has FSR 2.
Oh, okay.
Ratchet and Clank is what you're talking about.
Ratchet and Clank has FSR 3.1. Yeah.
And
yeah.
So were you feeling latency?
Oh, no. So no, not at all. In fact, AMD has some anti-lag type of stuff where they try to queue up stuff in the pipeline so that how that all jazzes out is that you're saving any type of input latency inside of the stack, right? So they're trying to compensate as much as they can, and they've increased it again, I think, in their just latest one, anti-lag 2 plus or whatever. This is the one that is... It initially got flagged from like anti-cheat stuff because of what it was doing. So now they're working with vendors and stuff so that it won't get flagged. So they are compensating as much as they can inside of the render pipeline to assist as much as they can with frame generation. The bottom line here is, right, like if you're doing frame generation and you're getting 30 FPS, your render window is 33 milliseconds, right? 33.3 milliseconds. So if you're doing frame gen at 30 milliseconds and you're frame genning up to 60, that's not ideal at all, right? So in Ratchet and Clank, I'm actually getting like 70 to 80. So I'm closer to 40 FPS mark, which is a bit better, like around, 25 millisecond, 20 something millisecond. But that all those things kind of like help, and you can feel the difference. I am not a big fan of 30 FPS to 60 FPS. Starfield and Xbox Series X kind of does it, but then every now and again it feels like it just stops. It will disengage whatever frame generation when frame rate gets too low, and then you'll just feel 30 FPS type of frame rate. So I think that that's a better thing that they did. But like, for instance, like what Wukong does in PS5, where they're doing FSR 3 at very low frame rate to get performance, they're doing 30 to 60. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I would rather you just play it at 30 FPS because you're going to be adding on latency on that. And it's going to feel, especially for an action game, I don't think that's a wise choice. But you need to hit like a minimum, right? A minimum frame rate to really be using FSR 3. But they do assist a bunch in a lot of different ways. But that's FSR 3.1. We're not, FSR 4 will be using ML, and that'll be decoupling things from the GPU, because the GPU right now for FSR 3 and FSR 2 leverages the GPU for all of that. Yeah. So you are actually paying a GPU penalty for engaging those for FSR 2 and FSR 3. Whereas for FSR 4, you'd be leveraging maybe agnostic ML AI engines from whatever. So maybe you can use Tensor Cores from NVIDIA. You can use whatever they're going to call AMD's, and then whatever Intel calls their thing. I don't see them using XNDNA cores. You wouldn't be able to use it on the Z1E because it's disabled anyway. So that kind of sucks for anyone that would think that they're going to do it. But as far as I know, the XNDNA cores are kind of decoupled cache-wise. So there is no cache coherency between the GPU and XNDNA. So I don't even know how that would work. And RDNA 4, when they talked about it, I don't know if you guys saw the headlines, they're merging pretty much how like NVIDIA does, right? They had they call it UDNA, Universal whatever. So now they're putting the ML stuff and the GPU stuff on the same die, which is what RDNA 4 does, and why the PSSR stuff was really impressive. What they showed off on, like what Digital Foundry showed off, that was huge, and you can see how blurry Final Fantasy was before and after. And PSR is doing a ton of work, even though that their render target is basically the same. I think it's only like 20p more. It's like 846 836p versus 856p or something.
Right.
But PSSR is making it look way better. So what you're seeing is RDNA 4 in those images. So that's impressive. What's already being accomplished. So yeah, I think it's gonna be really cool. But yeah, for like the next generation of stuff, or handhelds especially, I would think that that's going to be, pretty huge. But we're neither here nor there yet. We're just kind of waiting for the next generation of stuff.
We're always waiting for the next generation, but we don't need to wait to find out what Rich has been playing. Rich, what have you been playing, man?
So I haven't had a ton of time this week, but I did pick up a few games. But the one that I tried out, especially after Russ tried it, was UFO 50. So UFO 50 is really weird. So this is the game from the developer or designer of Spelunky, Derek Yu. He also made Aquaria, which is on Steam, and he's sort of like a pivotal figure in like the indie game scene, having run, I think it's TigSource, which is like a big indie game development forum. And so this game is meant to sort of mimic, Action 52 cartridges. So like those bootleg NES cartridges that you would get that like just had a compilation of 52 games, and those games usually sucked or were like copyright infringing, right? Like sometimes it was just ROMs of other games, but if it wasn't and it was an original game, it usually sucked. And so it's trying to do that, but not suck. And so like the Pico 8, it has like a whole history, right? So, and I don't know that there's much history in the game itself. Like, I don't know that the lore is there, but the point is that it's meant to be like a fictional console. And so there are 50 games for this fictional console that released between the span of 1982 to 1989. So they all have like a fictional release date. And so to that end, they play like they were released in that year. So the first impression you get is a game that was released fictionally in 1982. It's called Barbuda, and it's basically like a proto Metroidvania. So like if you think of like Wonder Boy and Monsterland, it's kind of like that, like those sort of MSX NES games that were kind of 2D platformer adventure, but before Metroid came out, or before like Super Metroid was a thing for sure. And so like it's just, and it doesn't have music, like it has sound effects and stuff like that, but it doesn't have music. And so it's just this really primitive game, and it's probably the first game you're going to pick. I think all 50 games are unlocked from the start, but it's the first game that your cursor lands on, so it's probably the first game you're going to pick. And I think you're meant to experience it that way too, right? Like you're meant to experience this like progression through time. And I think, understanding, like I've read Derek's book, Eggplant, and like understanding a little bit of how he thinks. I think that's, very much like the 50 games are in service of this idea of like just going through time and living in alternate universe, right? And so like that's, I think, the friction, because there's a lot of, it's not just Russ that had a bad time. I think that there are people that left, bad reviews, rightfully so, right? Like they expected more fun than it was. And yeah, I think those reviews have switched over now. So like a lot of people, it's closer to like 94% positive, which is interesting. But yeah, so I've only played the first game. It is primitive, but I'm just kind of like suspending my disbelief and just going through, kind of seeing what parts click with me, what parts don't. And the other thing is, there are no like strategy guides. There's nothing like that. And this is a huge game, so like you're not going to be able to find out much about the game, and you just kind of have to go through it by yourself.
I think, so I don't think the public knows the story here, because we only talk about it on Discord. I didn't talk about it on Twitter, but I did pick it up, and it was $22.50 or whatever, because it was on sale, but it should be like a $25 game. I ended up returning it, getting a refund. First time ever I'd done that. Like these guys walked me through it. They're like, oh, if you don't like the game, just get a refund. I'm like, wait, you can do that? And so I did that, But so my thinking was that, yeah, I jumped in that first game and I played it for, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And I wasn't enjoying it. And I didn't know anything about the lore or like that it's, kind of moving forward in progression and stuff. But so I played through that. I wasn't enjoying it. The thing that killed me in my enjoyment of it was that every time you died, you would respawn and you have these little eggs on the right side and you got 5 eggs, basically 5 lives. And I didn't see those eggs while I was playing. And I didn't understand what was going on until I was on the last egg. And I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't unlimited lives. I was cool with it, dying a few times. And I'm like, okay, just like kind of feeling it out. But I'm like, oh my gosh, this is as punishing as it was back in the day. And I thought this was going to be a game that was a mixture of old game, but like with newer like creature comforts, So I was kind of taken aback by that. And I was like, oh, there's no way I could beat this game. You know what I mean? With those 5 eggs, there's no way I could do it. It was so hard, So I already was a little bit turned off, but I kept playing. I played through the first 10 games out of the 50, and they got better and better. But I didn't realize it, I didn't realize it was progressing. I didn't look at the timestamp on them. I wasn't like in the lore at that point. I hadn't read anything about it. But it was getting better, and I was like, oh, this one's actually fun. Like I would play this one. I would play that one. But then when I was like, I could refund it, because I had already like kind of talked about some of my misgivings with it. So I did the refund, but with full intention of just buying it later when it's a little bit cheaper. I'm such a cheapskate. I was like, this is a $15 game for me, but not $22.50. It's $7.50, and I shouldn't be squabbling over it. But I had the choice, and I was like, I'm just going to do it, Yep. And so I think there's some merit to it, and I regret that I didn't play game number 49 and 50 to really see where it was going, But I will say by like game 8, like there was one game where you shoot your own character and you have multiple ways to kill yourself. And then so say you shoot yourself into a wall, he sticks into the wall, and then you can jump on your old self to get to where you need to next. And you've got like 25 lives. So you are supposed to die and sacrifice yourself to get further in the game. That was really interesting. And so I really enjoyed that. That was around 6 to 8 or something like that. So there were definitely some games where I'm like, oh, that's a keeper, but maybe for $15 for me at least.
Yeah,
so
I think that's fair.
You got through like 10 games or whatever. The return window for Steam is that you can't have played it for 2 hours.
Right. I didn't get through. I just tried out.
I understand. Okay.
So we're like 5-10 minutes each. Yeah.
All games are unlocked from the beginning.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
You should wait until they release an emulator for UFO 50 with save state and load state.
Save states.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be funny if they had that as an option in the settings, you know what I mean? To really kind of push it. That'd be fun. But
I'm definitely going to pick up I'm definitely going to pick up UFO 50 whenever I have time. Like I'm so backed up like terribly right now that I know I'm so shortchanged for time that I'm just like looking at a lot of things in the landscape. I'm just like, I really gotta. But I appreciate. I mean, that's just how I appreciate the authenticity of it, and it's just like, no, we're not going to hold your hand. Go pound salt. Just get your face kicked in, and play. The one thing that when you talked about, using your old corpse to like jump on, there was I used to play when my channel was more indie game focused. Whenever there would be game jams and stuff, I would take a look at those. And there was like 7-day first person shooter game jam. There was one game made by Wordle called Verticorpse, and it's a multiplayer game. And the idea was that when you died, your character stood back up and did his idle animation. So after enough time of you playing, there's just a bunch of you just standing there. So the idea is like you would shoot at someone and then run to where all the other corpses were, and you just stand there and you wait. So the other guy's coming in is just shooting at a bunch of empty stuff. It was a simple idea, and that was all that it was. But I really enjoyed the idea of leveraging your dead selves as a mechanic, and I like that idea a lot. That type of idea and thinking of doing it in different ways. So I just wanted to share.
Yeah, there are definitely some keepers on there, and I'm picking it up again, but just, like with you, like I was like, I've just picked up so many new games, I still need to beat Iron Meat, and then I've got another racing parking garage racing rally or whatever, rally.
Dude, that looks so awesome.
Yeah, that one's really
so
great.
Awesome.
From the guy from Jellycar. And
yeah.
So I have that one I'm playing through too, and I was like, this is cool, but it actually can wait, and it'll be cheaper by then.
And to your point, just looking at Parking Garage Rally Circuit, because that's the one game I haven't picked up yet. it's $8.40. It's $8.49, right? Like it's $8.49. I think you even said 850 pennies, right, on Twitter.
Exactly.
So like, yeah, I mean, there's just so much. And even I like the games that I bought them knowing like I don't have time for these. I just know that I've been like anticipating I Am Your Beast, UFO 50, Grapple Dogs, which is a sequel to Grapple Dog. And then there was one more that I was just like, I'm just going to, the Plucky Squire, right? And that I was just like, I'm just going to buy these, support the devs, and one day I will get to them.
I heard great things about the Plucky Squire.
I'm refolding it right now.
Apparently it's nonstop. It is constantly like interrupting you with like tutorials all the time.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
That's too bad.
I heard the same thing. Did you guys see the kind of like little trailer the Jelly Car guy made on Twitter?
Mm-mm.
It's pretty funny. He's like just talking to himself. He's like, so what's this game? He's like, well, they didn't have a physics engine that could like squish cars, so I made this whole physics engine to have like Jelly Car.
That. Yeah.
And he's like, oh, so you're gonna make a sequel to that? He's like, no, I'm making a game that's like Sega Rally that can look like Sega Saturn. And the guy's like, what? And he like points at his shirt. I really liked the entire execution of it because the dynamics of like, but yeah, I love Sega early 1990s 3D rendering, the quads type of stuff, and how chunky those like polygons are. Man, it's fantastic. Virtual Cop and that type of stuff, Daytona, like there's just a feeling to it that I miss.
Yeah, you can scale it too, so you can adjust the polygons, so you can make it crisper or more chunky. And so I kind of did the middle, and it looks great.
Nice.
Yeah, like I was watching your video, Russ, and like the name of the game. What's the name of the parking garage something?
Parking Garage Rally Circuit.
Yeah, and you were talking about that game, and the thing that stood out to me is as you're driving around in this parking garage is like just the graphical fidelity looks like somebody is up-resing something that's like 160p or something, and I was like, I kind of love that.
Yeah, it's great. The other cool thing, mechanic-wise, like it's all about drifting in that game, and the drifting is satisfying, which is like kind of rare in Sega games. And then also you get a boost afterwards, and so it's like Mario Kart in that. And so you really got to play that, and it's with the triggers. It feels great. You triggers an X button for that. But the thing that really sets it apart is that there are other cars on the track, but you can drive through them. You're not racing against them. There's not space because you're in a parking lot. So you can see the bronze, the silver, and the gold guy, and it's the ghosts of them. So you're just fighting against those ghosts. And so it's like really fun because you're like, oh, can I beat this guy, without having to deal with the whole bumping into him and all that kind of stuff too. So it's really just a time trial kind of game, but just really great. Yeah.
I just bought it.
I was going to say I just bought it too.
I'm sure the people who were watching the show saw that Rich and I were like looking down at our desks, and we're like, okay, continue to pay out
849 pennies. Yeah, like that. This is the thing, right? Like I didn't one game I did not buy was God of War Ragnarok, right? Because like I'm very excited about that game. I would pay the $59.99, but I haven't beaten God of War 2018. But even if I knew I wasn't going to play it, I can wait. It's made by Sony. They don't need my money right this moment. Yes. But these games that like the indie devs, if I have an opportunity to buy it, I'm just going to support it.
So I have been playing a game that you might not be able to get anymore at this point. It's called Zelda Dungeon to Infinity or Dungeon of Infinity.
Dungeons of Infinity.
Oh, it's pluralized. Okay, Dungeons of Infinity. So I have a video coming out about it, and I probably screwed it up and called it 8 different names while I was talking about it. But somebody took art assets and music from the Super Nintendo Zelda game, A Link to the Past, and they made a dungeon crawler, a roguelike dungeon crawler, where you at the very beginning, you pick your character. You got Link or the bunny or a frog or a bunch of people. No Zelda, though.
The frog, by the way, is the Chrono Trigger frog.
Is it?
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
Okay. I did not notice that, but cool. So you pick whatever character, and then you get to pick like a perk. So you can say, I want to start with a shield or an extra heart or some apples or whatever. And then you go into the dungeon and it randomly generates the dungeon. It randomly generates the enemies and the items that you're going to find. And then you just try and work your way down through 13 levels so that you can beat, and I'm going to probably say his name wrong because I've never actually heard it said, Aghanim. I just always just read it and said, I don't know how to say that, moved on. But it's the person who kidnapped Zelda. Spoilers for Zelda: A Link to the Past, but it's the guy who kidnapped Zelda in the light world, not in the dark world. So it's not Ganon, it's that other fella. And you go through and you're trying to get down to him. I think the furthest that I've made it is level 3, and the game is tough, really, really tough. But my favorite way to play it is I have it installed on my ROG Ally X, and I have a long USB cord that comes out of my arcade cabinet. And then I just hook this in, and then I stand at my arcade cabinet and I'm playing it with old school arcade controls, and it is perfect. And I just found out right before we started the show, it even has like a CRT filter so you can have it feel more retro. It is awesome. I love this game, and I really wish that he didn't use Zelda stuff because it's going to disappear, and we're never going to be able to, like, people who don't have it already are never going to be able to play it. Rich, you seem to know a little bit about it. Have you played it?
I played a tiny bit, but I did do some research on it. And apparently this person, he's been working on it for 4 years, and he says this is by far my greatest achievement. So I'm happy for him. I do hope that it somehow stays off the Nintendo radar. That's unlikely at this point, of course. But, yeah. That laugh.
What do you mean?
What do you mean? Yeah, so I do hope either way, Streisand effect, right? Like it'll be available. You'll find it. If you want it, you can find it. I promise.
Yeah, I saw that it was taken down from itch.io. It was on itch.io originally, now it's not on there. So I did notice that.
Yeah.
And if you're asking where you can find it, I'm not going to answer, but you could find it.
I believe in you.
Yeah. Carrie, you've also been playing Wargroove 2. I didn't know that there was a second one. I loved the first one.
Yeah, it was on Game Pass. It just popped up on Game Pass from recent release. I was like, oh, sick. I loved Wargroove. I just love Advance Wars. So it's like, yeah, I want like whatever neato thing. So I downloaded it, and I'm going through the unfortunate tutorial section, which is like 4 deep so far. The good news is that you can hold B to skip a bunch of crap. So it's not terrible, but I get it. There's a lot of things to Advance Wars, but like it should just ask you, have you played Advance Wars or have you played Wargroove before? Whoa, Christmas. I almost just destroyed my Lunar Lake.
Christmas.
Have you played Wargroove before? And it's yes, okay, skip this first island, right? Like just ask me if I know what I'm doing. Because I'm just walking you through, it's like you go next to it and then capture this, and I'm like, yeah, I can replenish. Oh, really? You don't say. So I'm just kind of going through that, but it's so much Advance Wars. Like, they did a fantastic job. They have a lot of stuff that inspired heavily for it, but a bunch of different stuff. So I can't really speak much to it because I'm only like an hour in, and it was like nonstop tutorial. So it's just Advance Wars like, but I'm gonna, play it sporadically whenever I can, just kind of pepper it in there.
Just an aside.
Go ahead.
Just an aside. You've played Into the Breach, right, Carrie?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then we're good. If you've played that, we're good. I was going to suggest it. Yeah.
I haven't played Into the Breach, so tell me why I need to.
It's Advance Wars, except it's a roguelike, and it's phenomenal.
Ooh.
It's like a small 8x8 grid, and it's top 2 tactics game I've ever played, easily.
Yeah. Made by the FTL guys, right?
Same guys as the FTL guys, yeah.
It's a Netflix game, too. So if you have a Netflix subscription, it's just free on mobile. So you can get it on Android. I think on iOS, too.
Nice. I actually showed that off. It doesn't work with the controls, but I did that on this. I was showing off Netflix and downloading games and stuff. And
nice.
Yeah, they had Into the Breach. I was like, oh, sweet. But it doesn't work with controls. It's all touch game. Like, well, this is worthless. It's not
good on a phone, though. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A thing that no one really knows, right? Like Netflix has games,
right?
The good ones, yeah.
I mean, I've been subscribed to Netflix since back when they were DVDs in the damn mail, and I never canceled my subscription. I have yet to try playing a single Netflix game, even though I am aware that it's not games made by Netflix. It's games that Netflix is just like, hey, if we give you guys some money, can we put you on our subscription? And I still have yet to try it because I'm an idiot, apparently.
Yeah, there's so many good ones. Shredder's Revenge is on there. Celeste is on iOS, or not Celeste, sorry. Hades is on iOS. Like, there are so many great ones. Dead Cells is on there as well.
The anniversary edition of Braid.
Yeah.
Very
exactly.
cool. All right. So before we get to the news, we had a message that came in from on the NerdNest Discord from user Mr. President Tom. And they were like, we've been talking a lot about the PS5 and the price of the PS5 Pro over the last couple of weeks. And Mr. President Tom said Sony just announced that they're selling limited edition consoles. They're only making 12,300 of them. And they said, basically, is it bad that they are selling a limited number of these? He says, in my mind, there's two types of limited edition. Limited time offers and limited production offers. So if you look at the Steam Deck OLED, when that first came out, there was a limited edition, and a lot of people thought, oh, they just made so many of these and you could buy them, and when they're all gone, they're all gone. But basically it was, if you buy them within a certain time, those are the ones that are going to be available. And then they'll say, okay, we're not going to make those anymore. And then they'll just sell the regular ones. This is, they're only making 12,300, which apparently has something to do with the date that the PlayStation came out. And how do you guys feel about that? Russ?
I don't like limited edition much of anything, but I prefer time limited. Like Mario 3D All-Stars is a good example. They just said, hey, this is only going to be available for a certain amount of time retail, and you just got to buy it now kind of thing. And then we won't be offering it later on. A lot of people are mad about that, but I'm like, I can still get one. You know what I mean? And I don't mind that, you know. When it comes to a scarcity model where it's you don't know how many there are, then that kind of gets me worked up. And I'm like, I don't want to compete with other people to get this thing for a limited number of it. I get it. The people who get it, it's going to be like worth more or whatever. I don't know. I don't really see these things as being like a collector's item or value beyond just the enjoyment you get from owning it. And so for me, I've never really kind of felt that way. My whole limited edition thing comes down from Analog Pocket. So they just released their like Game Boy Color colors, and they got me. I bought one. This thing was $280. And their marketing is always available in highly limited quantities. So that is not a time limitation, but that is a quantity or production limitation. And that always bothers me because I'm like, not only are there regular ones always sold out, but now they're going to make these highly limited ones, you know, and all that kind of stuff. The ironic thing about this, and yes, I did pick one up because it was still available for sale many days afterwards, you know, and so they must have hit some sort of ceiling where no longer was enough people who actually wanted or cared anymore. And then they started selling ads. And so I saw ads on Twitter trying to sell their highly limited release. They're like available only for small, but they're paying people money to see that because they're not getting enough interest. And so for me, make it a time thing. You know, you've got a limited edition thing, see how many people are going to order it, then make that many, you know, like that's what I would rather see as opposed to, well, we're only going to have 12,300 of them or whatever.
Rich, what do you think about this?
I think if I gave it more thought, it could probably be something I got, you know, more upset about. As of right now, it's something I don't have a strong opinion on. It's one of the distinctions too is that like I would literally buy an uglier version if it costs less, right? Like I would, like I'm okay with that, right? Like it's not that important to me. This looks beautiful. I don't mean that it's not. It is gorgeous, but my point is like I don't feel compelled to spend the extra money or spend the extra time to get the limited edition thing. This is just broadly speaking. I'd just as likely or much more likely, you know, like I said, just buy something uglier and spend more money on it, right? Or less money on it, excuse me. So like when I was shopping for an iPhone the last time, not this time, I just bought an SE. I just bought the cheapest one, whatever the cheapest one was. So I don't feel strongly about it. I feel much more strongly about all the other Sony things that have been happening as of late. This one is kind of small potatoes to me.
That's fair. Personally, for me, I don't want to have to, like, I think they go on sale on a Thursday. I'm at work, and I don't want to fight with all the other bots to try and buy a thing.
Yeah.
The one company that did this, well, there's a couple companies that did this the right way. Apple does it the right way, where you just say, "This is the one I want," and sure, I don't get mine on day one, but when they make it, I get it.
Right.
Valve did a great job.
No, we cannot do that. We can't
You
put
are
Valve in the
kidding
great
me?
job category. As you were describing
with the Steam Deck,
as you were describing this scenario, I was literally thinking I had to wait at work. The payment provider was crashing, like Valve's payment provider was crashing, and I ended up like I was there within the first few seconds. I should have gotten like a launch Steam Deck, but I didn't. I got like a late Q2 Steam Deck because of the servers and because of this weird model.
well, but they also didn't
the
let
model
bots
worked,
do
I
it.
think.
They what?
They stopped bots by requiring you to have, like, the thing that I was saying about Valve is they didn't have the bot issue because they didn't announce it ahead of time, and then they said you had to have a Steam account and
that was
have spent money ahead of time so that people couldn't like bot it to death. They basically got around the scalpers, and the only reason that there were scalpers is because the productions were like, the supply was so constrained because of the chip manufacturing shortage at the time. I think that was a good way to do it, but you look at like console manufacturers traditionally, they're just like, we don't really care. You know, the scalpers can come in and buy every Nintendo Switch and then turn around and put them on eBay for $1 billion or whatever. Like, that's a worse model in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yep.
Yeah, I would say that the Valve model made sense, and I think that was fair. It just, they didn't roll it out correctly. You know what I mean? I remember being in a pineapple field trying to freaking get my payment thing to work, and I ended up getting mine May timeframe, which I can't remember what that was, Q1, Q2, whatever. I was happy with that, but yeah, it was really rough to get that payment to go through.
Yes, and I do agree. It sucked. Like, I was actually doing a live stream at the time. I was playing a Zelda game on my YouTube channel, and like somebody was like, "Hey, the Steam Deck thing just went on sale," and I was like, "Oh, let me buy one real quick." And I put my controller down and I tried logging in, and like the rest of the stream was like me kind of playing Zelda with one eye over on the other screen, waiting for the payment process to go through, and then it would fail again. So yeah, there definitely were issues there, but I like the idea behind it. Carrie, what do you think about the 30th anniversary edition?
I think it looks so nice. Like, I had no desire for a Pro before, but I want it because I like how it looks. I have a DualShock 4 the DualShock 4 that is PlayStation 1 colors. Like, I have that. I bought that. I love that one. The DualSense alone, I want the DualSense controller that is the
me too.
That
That's all I
looks
want.
so the one thing that I'm kind of iffy on, which I kind of like because it make me not want to get it at all, is I think isn't it that it's a whole bundle? Like the 12,000 so you have to buy the PS Portal, you have to buy the Dual Edge.
Portal is separate. I want to say the Portal is separate.
It says on the picture right here, it says products sold separately.
Okay. So there was people that were saying that there's a bundle and it's going to be like $1,100 or whatever, and I was like, I don't like the Dual Edge. I don't want the Dual Edge.
I'm definitely going to buy a Portal and send it to Carrie. I can't wait.
It's gonna
Merry Christmas.
What do I do with this? I mean, out of all the portals, I'm like, oh, that's nice. I'll keep it in that box forever, so it can just sit there.
So we'll be talking about something on the show, and he'll be like, "Oh, hold on," and he'll reach up and pull it down instantaneously.
Yeah. It looks super. The only thing that caught me off guard was, did you see any of the pictures of the people that like saw it in person and were taking pictures of it?
Mm-mm.
Dude, the PS4 Pro is gigantic. Have you seen it compared to a PS5? It's like another 5 inches taller.
Oh my gosh.
If you buy that $30 stand.
Oh yeah. But like it's big. It's I mean, my PS5 right now, it's like almost like it's right next to my 48-inch OLED that I use as my monitor, and it's, a good distance away. But the PS5 Pro would probably almost be at the same height as my 48-inch monitor from base to the top. So I don't know. It's very tall. I I don't. Right now, I'm like in this weird thing. Like you guys have been talking about Astrobot, and I loved Astro's Playroom. Like when that was a packing game, I was talking that game up like crazy. I was like, that is a fantastic game. That is an exclusive that I think should, like you should play it for that. That alone is a fantastic game, and I've always been singing the praises of Astrobot. Uh, Insofar as you saw Sony try so hard to get a mascot with Crash, with Spyro, with Jack and Daxter, with Ratchet and Clank, with Kratos, with Sly Cooper, and none of them landed, right? Like none of them landed as a mascot like Master Chief landed for Xbox, or like Mario, or even any of the others for Nintendo landed for Nintendo, right? I feel like Astrobot has been the better mascot for PlayStation, and they didn't actually try to make it happen again. Like it's just organically like Astrobot is the face of PlayStation for me. And
I think they tried, because like, holy cow, you play that game and it's like you're flying on a PS5 controller. You're trying to rebuild a PS5. They were trying.
Yeah,
if
that's
they
the thing.
then
Team Asobi was trying, right?
no, I'm gonna say to try to make a mascot. I don't like make a mascot is what I'm trying to get at. Like they were with Jack and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, Sly Cooper, Banjo Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. All of these were trying to get a mascot.
Like there was like marketing behind those attempts to be a mascot, right? Like I think that's what you mean, right? Like that's the distinction.
Right.
Is like outside of the games themselves, there were like marketing efforts to push these brands as like Sony brands. Whereas Astrobot, Sony has been promoting it, but it does feel like, like compared to what they normally do for like God of War and stuff like that, like it feels more like the people have pushed Astrobot more so than Sony have pushed Astrobot.
Yeah. I feel like
me,
Astrobot is. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I feel like the only true mascot that PlayStation has ever had organically stick was Kratos. Kratos was always like they never really pushed it, like and to some degree also Sweet Tooth from like Twisted Metal would also get like even though that wasn't ever like attempted, but it was kind of like that was just organically following it rather than what they were attempting to do. And I feel like Astrobot, also just how Astrobot looks when you take a look at the robot dog that Sony has made, the real physical robot dog that they made. Like there's just a Sony feel for Astrobot to me that I feel like they finally have it, and I don't know if they understand that they have it. But in terms of a mascot, I know everyone is raving about it. I hope that it sells well because I would love these guys to make more. But very quickly, sorry, Russ. I don't know whether to buy Astrobot physically or digitally because of the next generations of PlayStation. Will they have a disc drive? Like, I am like terrified of like, do I buy? I want it physical, but is it going to be like caged to like PS5 and that's it? Like, I don't know what to do, and so I'm like, I'm just waiting. I guess I'll wait for it to hopefully go on sale, and I'll buy the physical, and it'll just be what it'll be. And I don't know, but that's where I am at the moment. I really want to play it. I don't have time, but it's definitely high on my list.
So I was going to say that Astrobot is PS5, like he's a representative of the console because he looks like the console, like you mentioned, right? But then also just like the overall, like he feels like a celebration of the console itself and everything that it does, as opposed to all the other characters, which are just like, yeah, that guy plays on PS5. You know what I mean? Like that's a different kind of thing. Astrobot is PS5, and every time I see him, I think of the PS5, the white and black and blue and all that stuff. And yeah, like for me, that's it's a totally different level. And I agree. I think that is the mascot for the PS5, at least. I don't know what the PS6 is going to look like or whatever. But as it stands right now, when I see Astrobot, I think of that console. And that is a very rare thing with a mascot. I don't look at Mario and think, oh, Switch. Right. You know what I mean? I look at Mario and I think of Mario, and he's on Switch. And so it's a totally different distinction.
Yeah, very cool. So those are the games that we've been. Oh no, we already finished the games that we've been playing. Moving on to the news. We got. Well, speaking of PlayStation, I mean, look, nobody's ever satisfied. When something gets announced, everybody's like, well, yeah, but what about the next thing? And so people were asking about the PS6, and apparently, Intel and AMD had a bidding war for the PS6, and AMD One, and here's what it says over at The Verge. It says Intel's bid was blocked because they couldn't agree on how much profit Intel would make from each chip it would design as the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing handled the manufacturing process. The report says the deal could have produced $30 billion in revenue for Intel, which was quoted in the article. Intel says we strongly disagree with this characterization, but we're not going to comment further. I mean, Intel, years ago when I used to build my PCs back in the day, like I would go Intel and Nvidia, and now like I feel like Intel is falling by the wayside when it comes to this stuff. Like you look at all of the handhelds are AMD based. Nintendo's based on Nvidia, probably with the next Switch as well. You know, Microsoft, the PlayStation is the PS5 is AMD. Is the Xbox AMD as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like Intel could have had a win and just said, "Hey, we'll take $30 billion." And they decided that they wouldn't take that much. They wanted more of the profits, and they just walked away. And that shocks me. Here's the thing. I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about whether or not this has anything to do with backwards compatibility. Does the chip does moving from AMD to Intel hurt backwards compatibility? I don't know enough about hardware stuff to know that.
Let me comment real quick. So there's something that there's a lot of chatter about backwards compatibility on PlayStation side that doesn't make a bunch of sense to me. Insofar as when they say that if you take a look at PS4, PS4 Pro, there is a multiple that has happened, and that has allowed the boost mode to happen on PS4 Pro. Likewise, for PS5, there is an incremental update to PS5, where if you needed a PS5 Pro, it needs to be a multiple of whatever PS5 was for all of that stuff to work backwards. And that doesn't make a bunch of sense to me because software should just adapt to the hardware. So, insofar as from the PlayStation side, this doesn't make a whole world of sense to me. The other part of it is that, no, it shouldn't matter because PlayStation themselves are making their own API for the system. So they have their own thing that they create on top of as a layer, and everyone uses that to produce games. So ostensibly, the only thing that they'd have to do is make the API work on Intel and then have it run. It's hard to say one way or the other because there's so much chatter of people just being very confident that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 are fairly rigid in terms of software that can run on the hardware. And any deviation away from that will break a bunch of compatibility, which makes no sense to me, but so many people are adamant about it. And it's like, okay, you know, you look at what Microsoft has done and Xbox One, Xbox One X, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, all of those can be handled by smart delivery. So it's just like, yeah, well, whatever. You have that game, it'll run on this. Okay, so deliver that. And it's like, all right, that makes sense. Like, there shouldn't be anything that is a hardware restriction.
The thing that, like, not an actual counterpoint, but I think that, like, the way I've interpreted those statements in the past is that, like, what Sony's, like, SDK or Sony API, like, what they recommend to developers is that you target XYZ, right? Like frame rate, right? Specific or like specific, like frame timing or something like that, right? Like very, like they get more specific. Whereas what Microsoft is probably putting in their developer recommendations is like time independent frame rate, right? Like you should be able to, your time independent animations, you should be able to animate not dependent on the frame rate whatsoever. Whereas maybe Sony is not like explicitly calling that out or something. And so like maybe there are games, well, Bloodborne is not one of them, but maybe there are games out there, right? Maybe there are games out there that are like, for some reason, like their animations are based on the frame rate, even though that's like, at this point, like nobody should be doing that.
Can I ask a question real quick? Just because I want to get clarification. So let's say I'm making a game for Xbox. The reason that they want me to make sure that my animations have nothing to do with the frame rate is because we have the Series S and the Series X, and they're going to have very different experiences. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if your animations are not dependent on frame rate, they're just more scalable, right? Like you can lower the frame rate and the same animation, you can raise the frame rate, same animation, relatively speaking. There are exceptions to that. So like fighting games are usually animated at 60 FPS, and like, you know, you're going to need to hit 60 FPS to get like the specific frames that you're looking for. But other than that, like, yeah, it's sort of antiquated to do animations in that fashion.
But
So
I
if
saw
you're
that
looking at
recently
Street
in-
Fighter 6 and you can't hit 60 frames per second, that's when the characters look like they're going in slow motion. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because
All
I
right.
think they're still going to render out each individual frame of the fighting move. If I
Gotcha.
remember
So an
correctly.
issue we saw with Tears of the Kingdom, when people were emulating it, they tried to emulate it at 60 frames per second, and then all of a sudden the cutscenes were playing at like 3 times speed.
Yeah,
Because they were
Yeah.
set to the target.
Yeah.
You know? So they had to put in mods and stuff and fixes in the emulation side to make that all work out smoothly. And so I think that's probably one of those where it was probably timed to the frame rate that they were shooting for on the Switch itself.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to say one way or the other depending on how they are doing things. So it shouldn't. Like you look at like even Xbox 360 games that can play on Xbox Series S or X, they can do a frame rate boost on 360 games. They can do a resolution boost, texture boost. They can do a bunch of things. They're like, yeah, it's running in there, but we have the power, so we're just gonna run it faster at higher resolutions with better textures. And it's like there it is. Like you look at Fallout 3 versus 360 versus Xbox Series X, and it is a full remaster of the game, right? It's like there's your remaster, bingo bango, done. And people are looking at Bloodborne and they're like, flip the switch, just goodness gracious, please just make it 60. Like, why aren't you just flipping the switch? So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, Intel has a problem, generally speaking. If they had a console that was going to do it, their GPUs are getting better, but they're still weird problems. So
Those are driver related though, right?
So they are driver related, which you would disassociate a little bit because you would have the game developer working so close to it, and whatever the API was directly targeting. So yes, but then you look at which game, God of War Ragnarok is performing very poorly on Intel DGPUs, discrete GPUs. It's actually performing terribly. So it's like just part and parcel with it. He's like, well, yeah, it's the drivers, and no game developer is really looking at it, but it's hard to say one way or the other. So I would say that it's Intel should have done this like how AMD was doing it. AMD was like, we are the underdog. We have to cut costs. We have to make deals, because you look at what AMD did, like as like the underdog. They made the Mantle API, which basically became Vulkan and DirectX 12. They just like, here you go, take it, run with it. And that became the primary APIs that everything is working with for Xbox and for PC. They sold their parts for cheap for PS5 and Xbox. So now you have game developers that are working directly on AMD stuff by default. So it's like NVIDIA is always going to be on PC, but now they have to do it for PC because they already have been. So Intel should have just taken this, like, we're going to have to take a little bit of a loss on this, but we need people to use our stuff. And we can't get people to use our stuff until they use it. So it's like, you look at Lunar Lake, the MSI Claw AI 8 or whatever. Intel should just seed those out. They'd be like, you a game developer? Here, take this. You a game developer? Here, take this. Like, just give them Lunar Lake on a handheld so that they could dog food it, right? Like, oh, I have this thing. This thing's cool. This runs like crap. I wonder why it runs like that. I can solve this, right? Like, you need the game developer to consider it, because right now they go NVIDIA first. I have to do AMD. Intel what? And, that's where they find themselves. So it's unfortunate for Intel that they were just not in the right mindset, but it's probably for the best.
I do think, to your point, exactly to your point, right, is that when you're in last place or when you're the underdog or whatever, like, consoles are that opportunity. I don't know Intel's business. I don't know if it was going to cost them 60 million and they would have made 30 million. So I don't know anything on that side, but like there is a nice advantage where you just have like, now you just have, like you said, a bunch of people are using my chip. And so like now you kind of just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see the benefit there. Again, I don't know if the business made sense for them, but yeah, they're pretty much in third place right now. So it would have been, I think it would have been different for them if they signed up.
You know,
The way I look at it, go ahead, Russ.
I was just going to say, you know, so this happens to me often as a creator, and probably you guys too. When I release a video, I put all this work into it, and I release a video, and it doesn't perform at my expectations. I have a moment where I'm like disappointed or whatever, and then I am immediately inspired to do better and to make a better video. And it puts so much fire under me to make another video and to work and like to kind of cover up the other one, kind of, you know what I mean? Even though I'm always proud of every video, I'm always pushing and trying to do that. And I don't feel like Intel is at that point in their like creative process where they're like, all right, let's buckle in and let's make this work however it takes, you know. It's almost like that dog meme, you know, where he's like sitting on a chair and fires around him. He's like, this is fine. You know, they're still in that this is fine attitude where they need to be like, all right, wipe the slate. What do we need to do right now if we were the same company that was trying to be scrappy and actually make a name for ourselves? What are we going to do now? And that's the kind of place you need to be in. I'm like that way every time I make a video that doesn't perform the way I want to. And I don't know, that's one of my favorite features of like creating is like that kind of thing. And I don't see Intel in that.
I feel like there's a lot of people that look at this and they're like, well, I don't care what chip is in the PS6. I don't care what chip is in my Xbox. I don't care what chip is in the Steam Deck. I just, want to play a game. And that's fair, but you don't want one company to run away with everything because then innovation starts to slow down. So that's why I'm like, man, Intel, you should have done something because you're limping along and AMD is just running out in front and, NVIDIA is doing whatever the hell with their, crypto mining, whatever stuff. So
yeah.
I think the one problem that I don't know if it's so entrenched in Intel, but they've been so dominant for so long that like I think back to AMD 64 when I bought AMD 64 for desktop and I was blown away. I was like, oh, they destroyed Intel. And I told my brother to buy AMD stock at the time, like in the late 90s or whatever. And he did, and it didn't do anything. I think it was like worth like $1 or something stupid. And he wound up selling it for like a small loss, and he was like complaining to me. And I was like, I was flabbergasted because AMD 64 was such a good CPU, and Intel was getting beat. But then Intel was like, hey guys, we're getting beat. And they're like, what do we have working on? Oh, we have the monster. It's called Core 2 Duo. We've just been sitting on it. I guess we'll just release it. And like Core 2 Duo comes out and just stomps AMD 64. And I was like, they just had that? They just had that in their back pocket? Are they just waiting to like unleash like this gigantic arsenal at any given point? And that's how they've just been, right? Like, so anytime that they seemed like they lagged behind, all of a sudden they just had something that was just like, oh yeah, we're just going to dominate everybody. Yeah. Oh, you guys are stuck at 28 nanometer? That's funny. We're going to go to 22 and then we're going to go to 14. See you guys. We called something 3D transistors. You might call it FinFET, but you're going to take 5 years to make it. And that was that whole thing is like the downfall of Intel, really. That's like the end of their hubris, like where that was. But yeah, it's so I don't know how far that is because you look at like 2017, that was pretty much still Intel is like still competitive. And then there's like this 7-year gap of like terribleness. And I don't know that they really understood because like maybe they were in their own sphere of like, we're doing pretty good. What do we got? No, that's pretty good. And, AMD's coming along and NVIDIA came along and it just made them last place. It's really fascinating to see.
Yeah, we keep seeing the graph for Intel just keeps on going down for market share. Or that kind of thing. And then you have the opposite. You have a graph that just keeps going up over and over and over. And that's the Steam graph that shows how many people are currently playing on Steam. Rich, you dropped this in our Discord this morning. Talk about 38 million concurrents.
Yeah. So to put it into context, right? Like Steam hit 33 million concurrent in January of 2023. And then they didn't break that record until March 2024. So over a year later, they broke it with 34 million. They may have broken it, but they didn't break it at the million mark, right? So March 2024, they hit 34 million. March 2024, they hit 35 million. March, they hit 36 million. August, so last month they hit 37, and this month they hit 38. So from 33-ish to 38, so almost like, I don't know, like 15% of Steam's growth has been in the last 6 months. And that is insane. That is just insane to me. Some Baldly Rudy, actually, the YouTuber Baldly Rudy, so subscribe to him, shout out to him. He asked me, do I think, Steam Deck contributed to this? Like, obviously not like 5 million users, but here's what I think. I think undoubtedly Steam Deck added new users to Steam, but also it made existing users, like it incentivized them to use Steam more often. At least it did for me. So I think undoubtedly it helped that number go up. It's part of that. Also, there are just some great game releases, right? Like Baldur's Gate 3, Space Marine 2 is a big one already. You mentioned that earlier. And then what was the other big one? Black Myth Wukong, right? Like, and that was big for China. I think the explosion of Steam in China, not even before Black Myth Wukong, you could see the trend where it's just been growing and growing. And I think now Simplified Chinese for the last hardware survey was the number one used language. So it'll probably fluctuate back and forth. But there's just so much that has contributed to this growth, but clearly it's been explosive in these last 6 months.
I think anecdotally for me, Steam Deck absolutely caused me to play more PC games again, because I used to play PC games all the time. And then I got to a phase where I was like, my computer is slow. And it's been so long since I built a computer. I didn't know what I wanted to build. So I was just I don't know what parts I want. And I didn't want to do the research. I'm old. I don't have that much time. I'm just going to buy consoles. And so I bought a bunch of consoles. And then the Steam Deck came out and I bought that. And I'm spending way more time on Steam than I ever had in years. And it caused me to buy way more Steam games. So I think that there's this knock-on effect or amplification effect of the PC. Even I think that there's people who are playing games on PC now that don't have a Steam Deck that are playing games on the PC because they're constantly seeing news articles where somebody's talking about some game that they played on the Steam Deck, and then they say, well, I mean, I can also play that on my regular ass PC. It doesn't have to be a friggin' handheld. And they start playing that game, and it just brings more people into that experience.
That's a fantastic point about knock-on effect, because also it means that Steam Deck specifically means that game developers have been paying more attention to scalability of their games.
Yes.
And so you see FF16, a lot of people, there's been a little bit of a backlash to FF16 just because of the high requirements, right? So it's man, a lot of people that play games on PC cannot play this because of those high requirements. And so we all get the benefit of just making more scalable games, whether you just have a very nice PC, a portable PC, or a PC that's been, around for a few years.
I got to say, I don't know when it happened, but I think I've just transitioned to be a PC gamer, and I am a staunch, if someone asked me, without even thinking, I would just say, oh yeah, I'm a console gamer. I would rather play on console. But if you actually look at the last 2 years of my gaming, it's been all PC. Astrobot is a real big exception for me, and Ragnarok prior to it, because they were locked to PS5. But Astrobot is the only time I've really thought to myself, I'm so glad I'm playing this on PS5 because of the controller and all the implementations of it. It's the only time where I'm yes, this is so much better on console right now. Every other time I'm I just wish I had this on PC and I had it on Steam, so I had all my cloud saves and everything else, and I can transition from one device to the next. And that's a huge change for me as a guy who's just always been console all the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I definitely think the Steam Deck has helped insofar as not just the unit sales of, however many they are, 3 to 5 million, so, whatever's there, 3 million as a minimum, right? That is not a big number to really jump that thing. But I think that you look at Steam Deck and Steam OS and all the things that they're doing, all the news that's coming out is this very positive news that, man, if I go to Steam, I'm almost certain that there's going to be a forward trajectory of new cool stuff coming because it's always coming. I just constantly see it. Like Steam Deck has video recording all the time now, and it's better. I can tag developers can tag it with cool stuff, and like, oh, that's neat. That's a new cool feature. And there's all these things that you see Steam itself just being a very good platform for features and stuff for developers to use. I think that's one of the things, but then you look at the mid-gen refresh cycle of stuff where the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, when they came out in 2020, there was zero way that you could make a PC for $500 that could match a PS5 or an Xbox Series X. There was zero way. And now we're at the mid-gen refresh. We still can't even match a PS5 Pro. We can if we do the CPU side. Like you'll make like a really weird compromised PC situation just to like get to $700 some odd for the PC, and you'd just be better off spending like a few $100s more and making it better than a PS5 Pro. So that's like one thing that I see. But then also, PlayStation games are now coming to PC. Xbox games are coming to PC. The only ones that aren't are Nintendo games. And even Ragnarok, unfortunately, you can't use a DualSense wirelessly, but wired, all of the DualSense features work. So adaptive triggers and all that other stuff work on PC for a PlayStation game. So it's like you're only a hop, skip, and jump away. Where for like Astrobot, I'm really hoping that it comes to PC with at the very least wired DualSense support. I really hope that Sony supports wireless DualSense. I have so many DualSense controllers. I have two God of War ones. I have a Spider-Man 2 one. I have the Astrobot DualSense controller now. So I have a bunch of DualSense controllers with the hope that they're going to get more use from me. But I think it's like you had said, Bill, like all of these knock-on effects of the greater picture, the sum of everything, when you take a look at all of them, that there's this momentum, a forward momentum of all these things coming to PC. And it's like, wow, it's like, I see that. And then also the younger generation, my kid elected to be a PC gamer on his own. I didn't like force it on him. He was always controller first. And then all of a sudden he was like, oh, I got to play with keyboard and mouse. Not because I was like, bro, you got to do keyboard and mouse, which I kind of did in the back of my head, but I was like, let me not PC gamer him just yet. And he's just hardcore keyboard and mouse now. He doesn't even use a controller at all. So he's full on PC gamer, and I see him playing, and it's like, I don't know, there's a bit of a shift. So it's interesting to see that growth from where we are. You look at China, I think China's probably a huge part of that by itself. But it's cumulatively, right? Like all of the little things are starting to sum up, and we're in a mid-gen like lurch, and there's just a lot of availability on PC. It's like, oh, that game's not out on, Xbox or PlayStation, but it is on PC. There's been a few games that were PC only that are cool. And there's lots of discounts that are on PC. So
yeah, hell yeah.
It's just attractive. It's overall attractive. You can use any controller you want. You can use any PC you want, and you see all this forward momentum. And I don't know, I was like, man, if I buy this game now and I think about a Steam Deck 2, that's going to be pretty awesome. So I don't know. I try to think about what might be going on in people's head, and I can see the growth, but it's for just like the last few months for that kind of growth. I don't know specifically what outside of like directly China I would attribute it to.
I see a lot of people who used to watch like a Nintendo Direct, like an indie showcase or whatever, and they'd be like, oh man, this game looks great. This game looks great. This game looks great. But now every time I watch one of those, the first thing I do is open up Steam and I look for that game. Oh, it's already out on Steam. Well, I'm going to pick that up then instead of waiting for it to come to the Nintendo Switch. And I've almost made that video like 6 times. Hey, a Nintendo Direct just came out. And guess what? All of the games that were in that Nintendo Direct, the indie showcase, they're all on Steam. So I could just buy them right now on PC if I want.
Yeah, 100%. And then they have like Steam Next Fest. That's also been a big deal. Actually, the timing is kind of similar, right? Like that has been a thing now for a little over a year. And yeah, you get the opportunity to play the game yourself. They're rarely ever like big games, but they become big because of the Next Fest, right? So like Balatro was a big one that like no one knew what Balatro was. No one had heard of Balatro being an upcoming game. Exactly. But that Next Fest demo blew it up, and it's,
And speaking of Next Fest, the next Steam Next Fest is next month, October 14th to 21st, starting at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And you're going to see a bunch of games and demos that people are going to be able to check out. And I guarantee that we'll all find something there to talk about on the show. We're talking about Valve and the idea that they've got, they've got so much momentum, and they've converted Russ to being a PC gamer
quietly.
And last episode, or maybe the year before, or maybe the episode before, we were talking about, when is Valve going to give us a set-top box that I could just buy and plug in under my TV? And someone left a comment. And this is an interesting discussion point. Someone left a comment. It was it's kind of small and hard to see. Joshua D. Simone says, what would you be willing to spend on a Valve set-top box to compete with the PS5 and Xbox Series? The deck is standing at $400, only $100 off from a Series X, $550 because of the Steam Deck OLED. So, Rich, what would you pay for a Valve set-top box? Just a box that you put under that's like a Steam Deck, but more powerful, without a screen, without a battery, that you just hook into HDMI.
Yeah. When I say what I'm about to say, I'm not speaking to anybody on this panel or probably anybody watching, right? But I feel like we've already, just a couple years removed from the Steam Deck, we've already lost sight of like how revolutionary that pricing was, right? Like $399 for a handheld PC is something that just had not been done. It just did not exist at all, right? And even now, you can buy $299 for a Steam Deck LCD, great, handheld that competes with the PS4. So I say that to say that like there was no analog. We couldn't compare it to anything. And so I am now entitled and now I'm spoiled to the point where if Valve releases a set-top box, I expect it to be priced at a place that just has not existed up until this point, right? So I would look for a $700 to $800 maximum PC to compete with the PS5 Pro, or a $500 to $600 PC to compete with a PS4.
And you think that Valve would be losing money on that because they know that they can make up that money because the Steam store is the default store?
I think that they would be willing to lose money. I don't know. If you price some of that out, I would expect that, you lose money, but I don't know what kind of deals they get with vendors and stuff like that. So it's hard for me to actually say. And then they'll have, the models that they don't lose money on. So I don't know where it all evens out to, but I do think it would, when we first learned of the Steam Deck price, what Gabe said was something like it was a tough pill to swallow, right? Like he didn't actually say, what's that, painful, right? He didn't actually say we lose money, but you surmise that. But either way, the point is it was painful. And I would suspect that regardless of whether or not they lose money, the price point that they would want to put it out, the price point that I would want to pay for, it would be painful for Valve.
What do you think, Carrie?
Yeah. I mean, so the Steam Deck itself, like, if you were been, previous handhelds and stuff going up to that point, it was always a compromise in a bazillion different ways of trying to make something run. And the reality is that RDNA 2 was the first GPU that could get low power enough, that was performant enough, that was good enough. So like that's really the minimum bar of what like what's in the Steam Deck is absolutely the minimum. You already see people like, oh man, 30 FPS, 800p upscale, like that's what I'm basically doing on modern games. I'm barely getting by. And once the Steam Deck came out, $400 for RDNA 2 destroyed everything else that was on the market. So they had future tech for a cheaper price. This is typically what happens for consoles, right? Like you look at the 360, it was using future GPU for $400, so you couldn't even like replicate it. You'd have to spend over $1,000 to get something on the 360 side. And then it kind of calmed down a little bit, but on Valve did that with the Steam Deck all over again because the handheld space was kind of like not really existent. It existed, but in boutique ways. And that was everyone's first introduction to it. And really it was the absolute minimum that they could have done, and the price was good. So if you were to make a set-top box, I also take a look at like what Gabe said, that they were surprised that so many people were buying the highest end version of the Steam Deck. So the own data that they have, they're going to be examining that, and I would myself wager that $600 to $700 would be the more comfort zone. And I would personally want Valve to just buy custom silicon, like go to AMD and just be like, we want your best CPUs, just a few of them, and just give us as much GPU as possible and as much bandwidth as possible. And then you're going to have a situation where a Steam box, a Steam machine, right? Like the official Steam machine is going to be almost like outrageously value oriented compared to anything else that'll be available. Because if they could just leapfrog everyone, right? If they can go to RDNA 4, if they can go to Zen 6, whatever it is, right? If they can just get ahead of everyone else and have a cheaper price, that's gonna blow the doors off of everything. And I think that's one avenue that they could do it. They could also just do this inside of a handheld again for a Steam Deck 2 and just leverage it in both ways. LPDDR6 does some really fascinating stuff where it can like just turn off channels. So you can say, okay, we don't need as much bandwidth in a handheld state, and we can downclock our GPU. And then when you dock it and plug it in, hybrid switch model, like how that works is that you just enable those channels and boost power, and now you're connected to the mains. You don't care about the battery. So there's different ways that they can do this, and it still be very, very performant and really great price-wise. There's a lot of different ways that they can tackle it. But then, there's also that news, like they're doing all that Waydroid stuff, which sadly it's Bradley that talked about.
Not just Waydroid, Proton Arm. So
yeah. So that's like a offshoot of like Valve just be like, we will run on everything. Like, what is it that you have? It is Steam capable. Like that is again, that's going back to what we said, all this growth in users, you're starting to see like, well, they're going to explode more if they can just run on ARM stuff. Like you look at whatever AYN Odin 2 or whatever, and it's like, well, we can run Steam games on it now. That's cool. And that's amazing, right? Like that's also, again, like the boutique things that you see. And then you might see like newer companies come in that are like, oh, we can just make a super ARM chip that can run Steam games. So the boutique stuff that already existed, you're going to see some fringe stuff from us showing off the cool stuff that it can do. And then, you'll see the mainstream start pouring into it. And then, Steam user number will go up. So yeah, it's, I still think $600. And if they did custom silicon and they just knuckle down and pay the price, I think that's the way they did it. I sent that email to Gabe. He still hasn't responded.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. So
600 and compete with what, like between the 5 and the Pro, maybe?
No, it would exceed the Pro.
The Pro.
Like handily exceed the Pro. But that's like, because where we're at right now, like you look at the Pro, it's that handicapped Zen 2 CPU and a mix and match of RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 of whatever the hell that is. So they can go Zen 6 and they can go RDNA 4, 4.5 or whatever, and any configuration therein. But the CPU portion of it is going to give them such a leg up over a PS5 Pro that is going to really differentiate stuff. So yeah, they're in a situation where you can really, really tackle some newer stuff. But then RADV is going to have the difficult situation of, oh crap, we have this ML AI component that is now part of the GPU that we have not been scoping out at all. Now we have to do upscaling crap on there. And that's like another thing that I didn't reach out to some people, but I should have. But you look at two different ways, right? Like what AMD does with AFMF, that could be handled in RADV, where you can just double frame rate, right? You can just say, okay, at a driver level, we're going to try to handle some way to double frame rate. Or you do it the way that lossless scaling does, and you do it inside of GameScope. So GameScope tries to double frame rate in some way. So there's two avenues that Valve could potentially try to do one of these things. I don't know if they see the value in either one. Like it almost be a little bit too gimmicky for them. But it's still interesting to think about. But then there's also, the upscaling component and how they're going to tackle that. The good news, Microsoft and DirectX, they announced that they're going with Spear V. So it's going to be kind of in line with Vulkan now. So it's kind of, no longer DXIL. So shader language stuff is going to be kind of unified. So that's great. There's a lot that they did work graphs recently. So there's like all of this stuff that has been building up, and everyone feels like the crud of it, like traversal, shader stutter, and all that other stuff. Everyone feels the crud of it on PC side, because on consoles they're going to offline compile all that stuff, right? So yeah, I think that we're in a better space, and I think Valve just wants to get to a spot where they could just be leapfrog everything, right? But again, $600, $700. I rambled a bunch. Apologies, but that's where I am.
Love it when you ramble. Russ, get out your wallet. How much you pay?
Yeah. So I got some mixed feelings about this because I feel like, the Steam Deck is so amazing in its price point and everything like that. And we've definitely made some assumptions about, like, just as a full user base around the world, about what you can get for that amount of money. But the thing is that that's an 7-inch screen or whatever it is, right? And you can hide a lot on a 7-inch screen that you will see on a TV that's going to look janky. And so you really have to boost the performance if you're going to be making a TV set box, especially when people have expectations at the console level, Xbox, PlayStation. They make something that's at the price of a PS5 and it doesn't perform as well as it, then I don't see that really being a big moneymaker, other than people just wanting to have their Steam games. On the other hand, they make something that is super powerful, more powerful than PS5 Pro, and is at the same price. Is Sony going to want to put PC games out anymore? Because they're going to be like, you're taking away sales of PS5 at that point. And so that's another factor to consider. You know what I mean? Like, they might not like the fact that there's another competitor in the console space at that point. Even though it's not a console, it's a computer.
Competitor.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how it's going to work. When it comes down to it, I think that the way I see it, I think Carrie's got some great examples of how they can use the latest APU technology and all that kind of stuff. I just want a dedicated graphics card in. I want a discrete laptop GPU or something like that. I feel like that'll just push beyond, and if they make it at a good price point, like, I don't know, I could see that working out really well for me. Like, Minis Forum and B-Link and stuff, they're really pushing towards discrete graphics cards and eGPUs and all this kind of stuff right now. I feel like we're kind of getting to this convergence point where the Steam or Valve can get involved in that and just do better than them with better resources and just better engineers. Like, I could see that being better. While you guys were talking, I looked up like the latest AMD discrete graphics card from Minis Forum PC, and it's called the G7 PT. I actually have it in the other room. I've had it for months and I haven't reviewed it. I'm terrible, but it's $1,200 and it's got the latest Ryzen 9 7945HX, and then it's got a 7600M XT GPU, so mobile GPU. And my plan is to, from Minis Forum, they call them Atom Man now for their high end stuff, $1,200, and I am going to turn that into a Steam machine like that. I've already talked to the company. I'm like, I don't want to review this thing, but I will make a Steam machine out of it, and I'll make a video about that because I think it'll be amazing. But it's $1,200, and I can't see anybody saying, "Oh yeah, like this is better than PS5 Pro." Of course it is. It's twice the price. And so, me personally, what I'm willing to spend on something that's going to be better than the consoles and whatnot, realistically, around the $700 price point. I'd pay more than a PS5 Pro or whatever like that. I think at a $700 price point, we get something that is console level, like specs and whatnot, to be able to play on my TV for PC games. That's a home run for me. It's expensive, but what you're getting out of that is pretty incredible too. So that's what I would say, $700 for me.
Especially if I never have to plug in a mouse and a keyboard.
Right.
And I want to play it on my TV. I just want to use a damn controller.
Yeah. But yeah, like, if you could pay $700 and you knew it was better than a PS5 Pro, again, gamers are the worst when it comes to value of stuff. And it's like a black and white. It's like, how much does it cost? Is it better than X? Yes, and yes. Okay, then I'm going to get it. And it's as like dry as that, right? And whenever this always came up, it was, the Win 2, it's $625. I can get a Switch for $300. And it's like, all right, yeah, okay, I can see this. I can pay $700 and get a gaming laptop. I'm like, pump the brakes. You're talking about two different things. Like, let's back up a little. We have a handheld here, and you're talking about a laptop. Let's get on board. So yeah, I am personally of the belief that a Steam machine could come out, match the PS5 Pro price, but exceed the PS5 Pro's capabilities by a wide margin.
Yeah, I think so. And the only ones that can do it are Valve, like B-Link and Minis Forum, and anybody else. They don't have the Steam store to subsidize the cost of making this thing. So, I mean, Valve, I'm tired of waiting for you. Like right now, Carrie, aren't you working on building your own Steam machine, basically?
Super Steam. No, you called it Super
Steam machine. Yeah, Super Steam machine. That's so that's the AMD 7900 GRE, which is like 30% better GPU than the PS5 Pro. And I'm using a B-Link, which has like a 12900H, which is an Alder Lake CPU, but I can push it up to 65 watts and it's fine. CPU wise, we don't really care as much. It's kind of generalized. So the good news for these companies is like the Alder Lake chips. I've seen a bunch of them just start appearing in a bunch of stuff. So I have to believe that Alder Lake chips are going for peanuts in China right now because they're just throwing in everything, and it's like $600 for the base thing. So yeah, it's how you look at this is still going to be like $1,100, $1,200, but I get a 7,900 GRE out of it, and that's enough to take it to the next level. But yeah, if I could do better than that at $700. I think that's like that's a place where people are all of a sudden like, well, hang on now, let me, is this the year of desktop Linux? Is when that happens, right? Like, is this meme finally going to happen? That's where we are.
Well, that's going to do it for us today. Carrie, why don't you tell everybody what videos you've been working on and where they can find them?
Sure. So my channel is The Fox on YouTube, and I've been swamped. So I'm finishing up the review for this thing, which Russ already did a while ago. And more importantly, I will have something this week on Lunar Lake. So I am benchmarking Lunar Lake as we speak right now. I've actually been doing it here, which is exciting.
Yeah, every time that you hear a bloom, bloom, that's him finishing a benchmark. Russ, what have you been working on, man?
So I just finished a big video about Emulation Station Desktop Edition on Android, like showing people how to set that up. And that's mostly because there are a lot of powerful Android-based devices right now, but there are more coming. The Retroid Pocket devices are coming soon. And so I'm kind of waiting for those to ship and get so I can make those reviews. So right now I'm kind of in a flux. And so I might do a video about this Analog Pocket. I've got another controller I want to show off because it's a surprise. But a couple other things that I'm working on, but nothing concrete just yet.
What about you, Rich?
I just finished a fun video, probably one of my most fun videos to have worked on, the one where I talked about Nintendo coming after Russ. So yeah, that was an enjoyable one to make. And yeah, if you're looking for something to watch on Fan to Deck.
Very cool. And I've got a video coming out. Well, I've got a video that I'm working on because about Nintendo being jerks, where I talk a little bit about Russ, but I also talk about the Zelda game that I talked about today, and them suing Pal World, which I don't think we ended up talking about in today's episode. I also have one of these puppies, the RG406V. So I've got that video coming out as well. And of course, stick around for more of the NerdNest podcast. But that's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys for watching and hanging out with us, and let us know what games you're playing in the comments down below, and go subscribe to all of these guys if you haven't already. I know that Rich is getting really close to 100,000, and he's somewhere in the purple behind him is going to be that silver play button that's just slightly smaller than the one that Russ has.
Awesome. I love it.
All right. Stay right, everybody.